20-year barrel-aged series. The Packers 2008 to 2013 seasons, the most anticipated and exciting series that we've done to date. We're picking back up from where we left off. And Dave, how's the fry and the dry doing?
We're a little bit fried this morning, just a little bit.
But we're trooping through it. Yes, cheers. And unlike Packers on the Rocks style, I'm drinking water. He's drinking coffee. We're not even doing any sort of barrel aged here at 9 bells, 10 bells in the morning.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing in the world yesterday. I'm texting you and it just comes out. I was trying to say my house is dry in terms of like liquor, and it comes out fry on my dry in the text message.
Thought you were keeping up with the young kids. I'm like, what is this a new saying that I haven't picked up recently? Is this what they're saying in the Midwest now as a way to get slapped and silly?
But
it works.
Anyway, let's roll kind of into 2008. So we left off in 2007. Giants NFC Championship defeat. Favre uncertainty heading into that offseason now. It's pretty clear that the Packers want to go with Rodgers. Favre said that he's done. Then the whole I'm coming back, flying down to Mississippi stuff happens. Trying to pay him off. They actually set up a contract for him to take like $20 million and send his locker down there to say, just stay retired. Comes back, all of Green Bay goes, buck wild like it's the Beatles coming to America in, the 60s. A lot of people, it was probably 3/4 of Packer Nation were like, yeah, bring back Favre. And then I was in Rodgers camp. I was kind of just like, we're a freshman in high school at the time. I was fresh start here. Let's see what the kid has. I think the Dallas game gave a lot of people hope that this guy could be the real deal. And then there's just a lot of turmoil in Green Bay. What are your thoughts on that kind of summer of 2008?
I remember there were like so many reporters, including Ed Werner, camping out in Hattiesburg, Mississippi on Brett's front lawn. And they're like, will he, won't he? There's rumors of him coming back. People were so upset when I was on NFL Network and ESPN and when Rodgers was taking forever to make his decision and before he got traded. I don't know how these back in 2008 when Brett years on end. And yeah, I remember him camping out at his house, and he went on like a late night talk show that sort of gave some hints that he felt like playing again. And it was that time where he gets the itch. I also remember, I think I took 2 trips up to Green Bay that year. One was in the summer. I don't think it was family night, but definitely during training camp. And I was in Favre's camp. I'm sorry. I'm 15 years old. Brett Favre is my hero. He can do no harm, regardless of back-breaking interceptions. And me and my dad, we bought a shirt that said, "Fire Ted Thompson." We never burned it. I don't know what happened to the shirt, but that's probably one of the biggest "we will eat some crow" moments in my life, is that we bought that shirt. And then the other thing, too, that this is more, I don't think a lot of fans know about this unless you're really there, but I read about it in a book called If These Walls Could Talk by Wayne Larrivee. On family night that year, when Rodgers played, he was booed that night. How quickly they forget how well he played against the Cowboys. He had, at one point, he was 1 for 6 and threw an interception to Aaron Rouse. You said 3/4 of Packer fans are on Favre's side. I believe it, if not a little more. He was getting booed in practice as well.
So you kind of took a little of sail out of the winds there. I was actually at that family night. That was my first family night that I've ever been to. We go up to Door County, Wisconsin every August. I was with relatives that came in from California, and on our way up to Door County, we were looking up. They wanted to stop in Green Bay, and they're like, "Oh crap, family night is tonight." So we actually stopped there, and that place was not having it. It was, the boos were raining down. I remember it being pretty loud. Family night's always sold out. I mean, it's crazy to think that a practice gets sold out. You can sell out a whole stadium, but I remember it was rough. Like he was throwing balls in the dirt. He was overthrowing people. It looked like they like blew a couple points dead because of like a would-be sack where he was just holding the ball forever and stuff like that. So yeah, that was wild. And then let's just roll into the season then. So
what do you think about the team, Dave? The makeup of it, comparing it to now with we're handing off the torch once again, the team makeup, the expectations, if you remember, heading into 08. I know there's something that you brought up before months ago about this 08
yeah,
team.
so it's a pretty, in terms of Favre's recanting of it, which I agree, the team was set up to win now. Right? Would you agree? Like you just come off an championship game.
There's really no weak spots on this team.
No.
They had the same roster and the same carryover from 07 that on the cusp of Super Bowl to 08. I don't think anybody left.
No, so like you were ready to win and you went from a veteran quarterback to essentially a rookie quarterback. Like he hasn't started yet. So it's not like a reboot or a reset. Like when you're replacing a quarterback, like that's a major change. So you went from like high expectations to I have no idea what we're going to be. Like it all relies on Rodgers' arm and legs, which, you know, you end up 6-10 that year, which, I mean, expectation wise, it probably was a kick in the gut to a lot of Packer fans because you just went from we're going to win the Super Bowl with Favre's back to we have no idea what this team's going to look like for the next 2 to 4 years.
And they had a ton of weapons around Rodgers. And you can tell they're trying to do somewhat of the same with Love, and it'll take a couple years before our tight ends develop in wide receivers. But look at that wide receiver corps he had to work with in 08. The offensive line was a bit flimsy, and he was sacked a ton, but it's also a product of him hold on to the ball. And then the defense was 100% Super Bowl ready. But when you're turning the ball over and you're doing 3 and outs, you're putting them on the field all the time. And then you have Ryan Grant coming off that incredible run at the end of 2007 and heading into 08. What I remember to kick off week 1 is Ryan Grant didn't play any of the preseason. He had a nagging hamstring injury. This is the beginning of his injury-plagued years. But he had a hamstring injury where he sat out the whole entire preseason back when they actually played the starters in preseason. I know it's pretty wild to think about. But he ended up starting week 1 against the Vikings. Me and my dad were at that game in attendance because we bought the tickets as soon as Favre retired, and they announced that we're going to be retiring Favre's jersey, and we're going to have induction at halftime to put him into, the Packers Hall of Fame. And so we bought tickets right away. It had his face on the ticket too. I don't think I want to share with Packers on the Rocks fans or yourself how much that he spent on those tickets because it was going to be one of the highest looked forward to games. But yeah, week 1 against Vikings, Aaron Rodgers first start. Also, ironically enough, was at Jordan Love's first start. And I had no clue what we were going to have out of Rodgers. You could tell he was nervous to start the game. And he didn't really settle in until he threw a deep bomb pass to Greg Jennings in the double coverage. And Greg, like he did so many times in 08 and 09 and even 10, he hauls in the ball. And then you can hear this sigh of exhale from the Lambeau Field crowd, a lot like when Christian Watson finally brought in that first touchdown against the Cowboys.
I'll tell you my light bulb moment with Rodgers in terms of being a starter. They're at the goal line. He rolls left, and I don't know how he gets this ball off, contorting his body, and then you see Corey Hall diving in the end zone and catching it, and it's like, okay, that's Favre-esque. Like there's some, magic there. There's a lot of talent there. We just got to put some pieces together and get him more consistent. Also, I mean, how he held the ball and how he threw it from 08 to progressing through his career was wildly different. He was like up high. He was a little bit more fundamentally
robotic at times. Yes.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you start to see the development later on, but that was kind of a key moment.
Where are you putting that throw at? Are you putting that throw in, like, if you had to rank a Rodgers top 10, just
it's for sure
roughly off the dome?
It's for sure top 10, but circumstance-wise, it might be top 5. Like, that's probably one of the most pressure-filled games he's ever felt. You'd have to
and it's Monday Night Football too, and
yeah,
he's playing against the Vikings. It's a rival, and Will Blackman had a punt return for a touchdown that game that really helped give us an edge. Rodgers had a rushing touchdown. Adrian Peterson, when he's one of the top backs in the league, we were able to slow him down, and he didn't go off for like 200 like he did so many times against Packers in 2008 to 13 in all those years. So yeah, week one, that very first game, light bulb moment. I thought, all right, we have a starter here that could be the real deal, or at least he's going to be a solid game manager, and we're not going to finish 4-12 like 05.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, there was ups and downs for sure. Rodgers had the most interceptions in his career out of any year in that one. I think he was, 12 interceptions or something like that. He had a lot of fumbles, I remember that year too. He just had trouble just hanging out.
You think about his legs at that time, and I know we'll get into it in like 9 and 10, but the first thing that jumps off the page when you go back and watch those games is how fast he was. And he talks about on Pat McAfee that people discount his athleticism and even like his draft report, but you watch how fast he was. He was like second in the NFL for a few years behind Mike Vick for rushing yards as a QB. He picked up a lot of first down with his legs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit of shake and bake in him too early on, and it was a lot like Mike had to keep telling him to get down or get out of bounds. There was times where he wasn't like shying away, and he was just taking unnecessary beatings.
Like I think of, I don't know what year it is, but he throws an interception to that Saints player who's almost going to take it for a pick six, and Rodgers comes flying like a bat out of hell to throw his right shoulder at him to get him out of bounds. You can tell that's a young player, QB, not really thinking sacrificing his body.
Right.
That could have been collarbone number 3 being broken. Any other games that you recall that come to mind? We start off this year 4-3 before the bye and Rodgers' contract extension. So that's a pretty exceptional start that I would take in 2023 if we were to get off to that sort of jump.
Yeah, and the one other game I could think of was the Colts game against Peyton Manning and all that. And it was kind of an up and down game for him, but I don't know necessarily why it jumps out at me so much, but I just vividly remember it was on CBS, and I just remember the big talk was Peyton Manning versus, up and coming Rodgers at Lambeau. I don't think his stats were all that great in that game. I think Peyton Manning had a rushing touchdown in that game.
Peyton Manning played terrible against us. Rodgers played mediocre, but his stats were more impressive than Manning. I don't know what
Manning had.
I don't know what Peyton had going on. He had a pick six to Aaron Rouse. Shout out Aaron Rouse, because I'm sure he has that football stashed somewhere on his mantle. And they had Charles Woodson mic'd up this game, absolutely shadowing and taking Reggie Wayne completely out of the game. Charles Woodson should have had an interception, but it was deflected by Tramon Williams or somebody. But it was blanket coverage, like prime Charles Woodson if you were to ever see him follow a wide receiver one the whole entire game.
That is the big thing, too, that we didn't quite touch on that we probably should have about the offseason. Bringing in Woodson and him
in 06, yeah.
But, we touched on that. But, yeah, that's when Wood started kind of coming along. In 09, he just kind of absolutely jumped off the page.
He had a Reggie White type year. One of the best performances that you'd ever see out of a defensive player in how many different positions. That may be jumping ahead of the page, but yeah, this is when Charles Woodson starts to really come together and making interceptions and the Wood that we know that became the Hall of Fame player, at least kind of on the cusp of being a Hall of Fame player. And the other one really to highlight this year that took off and everything finally clicked for him is Nick Collins. Dave, he had almost 300 interception yards in 2008. 300 yards. Do you remember some of those interceptions and Nick Collins taking all these? That's where he got the nickname Nick the Pick Six.
I remember more of the '09 and 10 defense than I did '08. Those just stand out way more to me. Probably a good spot to roll into '09. Like you bring in Clay, you bring in BJ Raji. That was a hell of a draft. And
That's one of Ted's best by far.
Yeah, yeah. So you bring in those guys. And then so that like '09 defense was.
This is Dom Capers' first year too as a DC.
Probably one of my favorite years of like when the defense was on the field, being excited that the defense was on the field. And then every year after that was just like, good God, like don't have the defense on the field.
And if you want to see good run defense, you think of today and how bottom of the barrel, speaking of barrel, no pun intended, how bottom of the barrel we've been with rush defense. And you talk about how we don't prioritize it.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to put any Gilbert Browns in there or Grady Jacksons or Johnny Jollies. 2009, we finished number 1 as a unit in run defense with Ryan Pickett, Johnny Jolly, Cullen Jenkins. I think is such an underrated player for the Packers, an unsung hero. It was. You look forward to them getting on the field and Clay with his reckless abandon flying around the football field and him stripping Adrian Peterson in that. I don't want to jump too far into those games, but that was a really exciting defense to watch.
Absolutely. I mean, you had pretty much blanket coverage. That was the start of them experimenting with Wood in the slot, and they bring in the Woodson kind of patented slot blitz. That was just it was a lot. Tremaine was coming into his own at that point.
Jay started throwing us the ball. Jay Cutler.
Yeah, that was shout out to
Jay Cutler became our second best quarterback in Packers history. And then I at least have to mention this on offense. We don't need to go into comparisons all too much, even though it's so much fun. The Rodgers to Jennings connection. This is the first one that he finds a wide receiver that he loves, that he knows where he's going to be at all times. You watch the highlights in 08 and 09, and then even in 10. Greg was so sure-handed, and how many deep go balls they had. You wonder why Rodgers just throw these sort of shot plays down the field on 3rd and short or 4th and short to Christian Watson or others and Devontae Adams. That connection he had with early on with Greg, it's not too far off of Tay or Jordy.
No. I would put that. That's your top 3 right there. It would probably go connection wise. It'd probably go Jordy, then Tay, and then Jennings.
Yep. Or you could blindfold Rodgers and he could throw to Jordy Nelson.
Yeah.
This is Jordy. So Jordy's redshirt year was 2008. 2009 is also when the light bulb starts to come on and he's getting more playing time as the season progresses. And you see Rodgers finding him much more. And then you got, obviously, Donald Driver and James Jones. And this is the coming out party year for J. Mike, too.
Yeah. Was it 2000? It might have been 2011. But there's a throw, speaking about top 5 throws that Rodgers ever had. It's against Detroit, and it's the smallest window ever. And he fits it in the back of the end zone to Finley. And it's between two. Yeah. Yep.
Yodo. We love you, J. Mike. We still haven't replaced you.
might have this year.
There's a good shot at somewhat filling the void.
Oh,
yeah, Dave, I want to say that's 2010. We fed him consistently for like the first 5 games. We were almost force feeding J. Mike with 12 targets a game.
Yeah. But any games that stick out in 09 for you?
I got a few. Well, this is when Brett Favre joins our hatred Minnesota Vikings.
We'll never forget you, Bert.
Yeah, never forget you, Bert. Oh, and then the noise, the Boo Birds. They've never been stronger in Lambeau when he came out. I was at the week 2 game. It's not too much of a memorable one. We played the Bengals. It's probably one of the only losses that I've been in attendance for. Not to say I'm a good luck charm, but I also, I'm pretty strategic in the games that we choose to visit. Where we have a pretty good feeling we're going to win. Charles Woodson had 2 interceptions that day. He's Defensive Player of the Year. Two picks, one for a house call. Me and my dad left early because we thought the game was out of hand. They were up by like 2 scores late. We recovered the onside kick, and like we're walking back to the car, and we hear other Packer fans making cheers, and we're like debating on whether to go back in Lambeau or not. I don't support that call to leave early in the game.
No.
But yeah, that was week 2 against the Bengals, and somewhat at the beginning of Charles Woodson going on a tear in a season that you can put up against Darrelle Revis. And when they show that stat line of him locking down all those number 1 wide receivers. So the beginning of Seawood, and then you got in week 3, us going up to Minnesota, Monday Night Football, playing against Brett Favre for the first time. And I think it was a record-setting game for viewership on ESPN. What do you remember from that? It was either Sunday night or Monday Night Football game, playing Brett the first time with him in purple and gold.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, the cameras were just glued on Brett, so I remember him just like on the sideline, like coming out of the tunnel from the visitor side. I remember him standing on the sideline. He had this stupid purple like earplugs in for like canceling some of the noise, and he didn't have a fantastic year with the Jets. So then coming to Minnesota, it was like, okay, clearly you want to get your revenge. But I think everyone thought that he's over the hill at that point, and then he comes out and he's like the Brett Favre from like MVP years again, and it's like, oh crap, like it was. I mean, that's probably where a lot of the hatred for the Vikings kind of restarted. I know they've always been our rival and stuff, but that definitely kicked it up a notch. I remember the intensity. And you're right. It was like, I think it was Monday Night Football. I don't think it was Sunday. I think it was Monday Night Football.
We know how much Jermichael Finley loved playing in Monday Night Football, and they said that he was one of those players that the primetime lights come on, and so does J. Mike.
Yeah, my recollection of 09 was we got into a lot of shootouts that year. But I want to go back to the Charles Woodson stuff. I really remember that Detroit game, the Hello Heisman game that he had. Yep.
Picked off Stafford. That was right around the year too when there was a segment on Fox where Charles Woodson donated like $2 million to a hospital in Michigan. Played college football there for the Wolverines. But they talked about it that game, and boy, you go back and watch some of these. Like he is like you don't see cornerbacks take over a game and wreck it quite like Charles Woodson was doing that year.
I think he forced a fumble in Detroit, and then he had 2 picks, and he was just on a different level.
There was that one and the Cowboys game that he played. I said Rover. Put in my notes here. His stat line was he had a strip sack where he strips it and then he's going to the sideline because he thinks the play is over and he's celebrating. And here's Clay Matthews along the sidelines trying to pick up the ball.
Yep.
He had another forced fumble in that game and then an interception to seal it and win it when they were trying to throw to Jason Witten and on an out route. And then here's Charles Woodson jumping it to seal the victory for us.
That's where our fun began against the Cowboys, I think. There was a good stretch where anytime we played Dallas, it was just Rowe was going to throw us the ball a bunch, and we're going to put up a lot of points.
I would love to know what our record is against Dallas from 2009 up until present. We've maybe lost to him, once or twice? No, and I remember there's this play where Roy Williams catches a ball. He's running upfield, getting some yak, and here comes Charles Woodson once again out of nowhere coming in and like
Yes.
Peanut Tillman coming in and hitting the ball. I think that's that game too.
Yes,
that
it
game
is.
almost started the conversation of, all right, this is defensive MVP. Should he be the MVP of the league?
Right. That was crazy. And then, do you remember the Pittsburgh game, the Pittsburgh shootout game?
Oh yeah, like 40,
That was
45,
so much
45,
fun.
41. It's
Yeah,
a loss. It's a
we
loss. That's
lost,
still
but
fun to
it's-
go back and watch.
I mean, Roethlisberger had like 500 yards against us. Rodgers is a top 400s. Finley had a nice catch in the back there. What was it? Was it the Madden game that came out the year after? Was like when you start up Madden, the highlights were from that game.
And I know there was a play that Rodgers hits Jennings on a post route, and it's one of those, he catches it for 20 and then goes for another 50 and a touchdown. James Jones could have had a long touchdown in that game too. Yeah, it was just a back and forth. One of those where the punters are getting splinters on the sidelines on the bench.
And then this is kind of the start of
oh, Dave, please don't go there. I know we
yeah,
have to.
yeah, the shootout in the desert. More
Oh.
heartbreak. That was what we got down early, like really quickly in that game.
Yeah, Rodgers had nerves in that game. He
Yeah.
threw an interception like on one of the first plays of the game. And then Donald Driver he coughed up to the ball after he caught it and had a fumble.
And then it turns into 51. What was the final score? 50. I know the Arizona had 51, where we lost by 6. Obviously, they didn't kick the extra point, but yeah, that was a wild roller coaster of emotions there. It was, oh crap, this game's kind of over. You're down 14 to, oh, we're in this, to the infamous play where you see Rodgers getting face masked, dragged to the ground, ball is kicked up in the air by his foot and caught and run back. You see Mike McCarthy drop into the sideline like he got shot in the back.
He's never done that. That's the only time I think you see Mike drop to his knees like that. We were down 31-10 at one point in this game.
Was it that bad? I don't remember.
That bad too. And Dave, I don't know if you brought this up in the past to me or where I read about this. Jermichael Finley was such a crucial piece to our offense that year. I heard that he stayed out late the night before past curfew, and if you're violating curfew, there's a penalty and there's a ramifications because of it. And Jermichael Finley, he shouldn't have played in that game, but Mike McCarthy knew how much of a valuable piece to the offense he was. He still played. He had like 100+ yards. He's catching anything that Rodgers is throwing up to him. Announcers are like, this guy's a mismatch. You can't put a linebacker on him and you can't put a cornerback on him. He's too big and then he's too fast. And then Craig Jennings had some insane catches in this game that you watch Devontae and some of the one-handed and jump balls that he brings down and just the way that he's able to contort his body. Yeah. Greg had a couple of them in this game that you just marvel at that he's able to haul these in. Yeah, down 17-0 early. I don't want to think about that face mask.
All right, well then let's roll into 10 then, because that's a good year.
That is, yeah. And then we got our Super Bowl run and the return of Lombardi back to Titletown.
Yeah, that was a weird year. 10 in terms of regular season, where you just didn't think much was gonna come out of it. Because it was just every game was a close game. Washington and Miami back-to-back, you lose on field goals. Rodgers is concussed out of his mind in Washington. Rodgers gets concussed again in Detroit. You have a Matt Flynn game against the Patriots where I think we're like, okay, we're going to try to ride the ship here. It was a really bumpy ride compared to a lot of years where we're like, this is our year. We're like smoking everyone, and then there's a disaster in the playoffs. This was a very battle-hardened team.
I think this is an opportunity too to shout out once again, like you said last episode that not a lot of people pay enough respect to Ted Thompson. it's an ode to him because of how deep this roster was.
Yeah.
You hear about the 2010 season, we had 15 players go on injured reserve. That happens within our last 5. We're toast. We're going three wins, maybe 5 max. But this roster was so deep. And the key thing is that we didn't lose any of our core players during that year. We didn't lose Rodgers. We didn't lose Jennings.
Well, you lost
we didn't
Grant.
lose Clay.
You lost in the
and
first
it was
game.
just like 07. We didn't have a run game until James Starks comes in and rounds our offense out. Clay didn't get hurt. Nick Collins, BJ Raji, Sam Shields is a rookie that year. I remember going to that family night game, watching him have a kickoff return for a touchdown, another interception. When Tremont says, hey, if you're going to make this team as an undrafted free agent, you need to make a play a day. And Sam Shields was doing that. And he ran a 4 too. So it's like, we just got to find a way to get him on the roster and get the ball in his hands.
Yeah, Sam, you make a good point there with the depth and all that. You had Will Blackman went from, being prominent as a cornerback to kind of getting kicked into that slot role at that nickelback and special teamer. He was amazing as a gunner. Where was I going with this? My bad. Go ahead, take it from here. I lost my train for a sec.
Yeah, just how deep we were with that roster. And other thing that I thought about too is you think about confidence. So you got Ted Thompson putting a ridiculous roster together from top to bottom through the whole entire 53. And then there was 4 different ways that the Packers called their shot that year. They knew they were that good. Four ways they called their shot that we're going to bring the Lombardi home. The very first one was Mike McCarthy put up that blank picture in Lambeau that he said, hey, we want us to be remembered forever. And you guys want to put your name right next to that picture and the other Super Bowl champions and have 2010 be up there. That was the first time we
I remember the other 2. It was they got fitted for their Super Bowl rings before the game started.
Yep.
And then I know that Woodson, after the Bears game, said, hey, Obama was from Chicago. He was president at the time. And the Bears lost. And he said, okay, I'm no longer going to the Super Bowl. He was going to go to the Super Bowl if the Bears went in. And Wood comes into the locker room and says, well, if the president doesn't want to come see us play, we'll go see him. And everyone just friggin' erupted. That team had so much swagger. Wood really coming into the leader. And then that playoff run is when Rodgers, I think, became Rodgers. Where that you just see the Philadelphia game was nuts. You had probably my favorite sack of all time, where it's a dog blitz and Vic just gets blown up on that first play. And then you have Tremont stealing it in the back of the end zone with the interception. I'll tell you what, I wasn't nervous the entire game in Philadelphia until that last drive, where it's like, okay, it's one of those games where a team sticks around and makes a couple of plays and they kind of beat you situation. And then Rodgers' best game ever in Atlanta. It was one of my favorite lines ever was the announcer said, Atlanta hasn't beaten this thoroughly since Sherman came marching in the Civil War. I mean, it was the plays where he's spitting out of sacks. Atlanta, someone does the belt on him, and if you do the belt on Rodgers, you have a pretty good track record of getting beat by Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers spitting out of sacks, throwing it to James Jones on an out route after he spins out of one.
Is it Jonathan Abram that he makes look foolish, and he's got him dead to rights 4 or 5 times, and Rodgers is turning his back, spinning out of it, juking him, buying time.
That was you have Matt Ryan trying to get some extra points on us before half. Just a quick little sprint right out route. Williams comes out of nowhere and houses it.
There's a few playoff games where we're on the wrong side of that heading into halftime. That Bucks game when Kevin King gave up the touchdown. Also in 2011, us giving up that Hail Mary to the Giants and Hakeem Nicks in the end zone that turns a tide. And the momentum completely changes coming out of that second half. And I don't know, this is just a theory that I have. You mentioned that Rodgers had 2 concussions that year. The one in Detroit, and then Matt Flynn comes in against the Patriots, and we played one of the best games that year. And that was really the confidence booster for our team.
Yeah.
We're like, if we can almost knock off what is a Super Bowl favorite, then when Rodgers comes back, we have it. And they lit up the Giants. My theory is that Rodgers, or that concussion that Rodgers had against Detroit, somewhat put him into a flow state where he was locked in after he came in. He could do no wrong. Kind of like when he got shot up at halftime against the Bears, and he said, "My leg." I don't know what, for whatever reason, he comes back and then just torches the world and lets everybody know that, hey, I'm here to do more than fill the shoes of Brett Favre.
Yeah. And then you go to Chicago, and it's kind of a classic early football game where it's just 2 heavyweight defenses battling it out. It's freezing cold. Probably no one wants to catch the football. Rodgers has a terrible interception to Urlacher, and the play of the game is him tackling Urlacher. Bears are down to their 3rd-string quarterback, Haney, who's actually making a run, and then finally B.J. Raji gets the pick 6 to seal it.
Sam Shields was huge that game too.
Yeah.
He had 2 interceptions. He had one in the first half. Jay Cutler's going deep along the sidelines that he stretches out his long arms to get that one, and then the one to send us to the Super Bowl when Caleb Haney's driving down the field 21-14. You're thinking, oh no, do we have some sort of Cubs curse against us where it's not going to happen, and the Bears are somehow going to tie this thing and then punch their ticket to the Super Bowl in overtime. And then besides Tremont going off, and we know how important he was to the team and all those interceptions, once again, James Starks in giving us a run game. Against the Eagles, he had 100+ on the ground. I remember this play against the Bears in the NFC Championship game where he's like stuffed at the goal line against Lance Briggs, and he's stretching out the ball to put it in the end zone. And that's that type of toughness and physicality that, hey, if he's able to punch it in from the goal line, I have a pretty good feeling that we're going to make it to Dallas.
That first drive against Chicago made it seem like it was going to be a cakewalk. It was just 20 yards to Jennings, 20 yards to Jennings, 20 yards to Jennings, Rodgers roll left, touchdown. Oh, okay, we're on our way.
And he's basically picking up where we left off in Atlanta. We're like, oh, this is going to be a rout. We're going to close this thing out like 35-14, and we're going to be playing Matt Flynn here in the 3rd and 4th quarter while everybody else is celebrating on the sideline. Wouldn't that be quite the memory and story heading into the Super Bowl? But I'll take it with the fridge coming alive, and his nickname,
the Freezer.
The Frieza, yes. Yeah, he's like, I'm not the fridge, I'm the Frieza. And those dagger calls that you hear Wayne Larrabee have from the playoff games that were so memorable. Dave, that leads us to the Super Bowl. What can you recall? Were you with family that day watching?
No, I was with a couple of friends. I actually, I generally nowadays kind of like watching games by myself and just kind of letting the emotions take its course and being able to dissect the game and not have that outside noise. But it's the Super Bowl. I was at a Super Bowl party with all Bears fans. I'm the only Packer fan. So, of course, anything that happens or springs up that could go wrong for the Packers, I have, a bunch of high school kids in my face at the time. So it was just kind of like I was trying to be in my own little bubble there. And then that was another game where it seemed like we were on another road to it not being close again. And then Pittsburgh hung around. There's so many good soundtracks in terms of audio from that Super Bowl. Probably the most YouTube clip from that Super Bowl is the late, great, Kevin Green coming up to Clay Matthews and said, Wood breaks his collarbone, he's out. Wood's gone. Wood's the leader. You need to be the guy, basically. It is time. And that's just, then the next play, Spillett Pickett. And they switch and they just collide with Mendenhall. Ball goes flying out. Bishop springing to life, grabs it, starts running, and it's like, okay, that was, I mean, then you have Jennings catching the touchdown in the corner. I think he jams his finger. He's checking his finger, and they say, "Oh, you all right?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm just seeing if the Super Bowl ring will fit."
He's just fitting his ring on. He already knows that it's in the bag, and they have this thing riding home. Do you think that they handed the players like a new script at halftime or before the game to confirm the conspiracy that there's a script to begin the season? Like you hear Kevin Green say that it's time, and then literally coming back out of the TV break, Clay Matthews is forcing the fumble, like is Desmond Bishop and Clay Matthews reading. All right, Rashad Mendenhall, he's gonna come here. Ryan Pickett, tell him to spill it, and then you're gonna come in, put your helmet right on the ball to punch it out, and Bishop, hey, be somewhat close by it to pick it up and see if you can get a few yards.
I would love to ask either Bishop or Pickett or Clay, when you go into the huddle on that play, do you know what's coming? Like, is it, hey, this is going to be a run to the right? Like, we all know it. Like, if I say spill it, do this, and I'm going to shoot the gap here. Like, I want to know if they basically knew exactly. It seems like they knew exactly what was coming, but I want to know what the dialogue was in the huddle of that play. Obviously,
what are you seeing? Is there a tell by the way that the tight end set up, or the offensive lineman is in his stance, or maybe there's a couple of plays before that there's some sort of tell that gives them off from their film study that Clay Matthews knows that he's going to be freed up and can meet Rashad Mendenhall straight up in the hole.
In the Super Bowl run DVD, you can hear Clay say, "They're all looking at me. I know the ball is coming this way." But I want to know okay, the guard or the right tackle, they're positioned a certain way, or even if you knew they were running to the right even before you even saw them line up. It would be a great question to get from one of those guys of what the conversation was like heading into that.
I think we're going to get that answer from Desmond Bishop here shortly, Dave.
Oh.
And on the offensive side of the ball, this is a near perfect performance from Aaron Rodgers. Mike McCarthy says heading into this game, whether everybody else knew the game plan or not, that they're going to expose the Steelers' pass defense. Troy's getting older. Troy won the Defensive Player of the Year. And it was like heading into the Super Bowl that they thought Clay Matthews won it. A couple people made an announcement that Clay Matthews won Defensive MVP. Could you imagine going from C. Wood to Clay Matthews back to back on your defense? Then Troy got it, and Greg Jennings said, "Hey, you throw a corner route and you got it there all day. It doesn't matter who you put in that spot. Troy can't flip his hips and keep up with us."
There was that. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that there was the start of the four wide, and they were just okay, our fourth wide receiver is way better than their fourth cornerback. You had Jennings roving into the slot and just completely, because they weren't trailing with him. It'd be Greg Jennings on the fourth cornerback, and they just had a safety, and they run that skinny post, and they did it a couple times. The one for the touchdown where Ryan Clark comes shooting through it and just misses his fingertips, and you see him kind of dazed of how did that ball get through to seal the game. It was the exact same route. And then there's some negatives to it too. I remember being extremely frustrated with how many drops we had. James Jones could have sealed it at the end of halftime. Jordy, I don't know, put a stick of butter on his receiver mitts, because there was times the ball was just.
I don't think he dropped the ball after that. He only maybe had one other drop against the Bills. It was 2013 or something like that Rodgers likes to dig him about. But besides that, Jordy was so sure-handed. He had a couple drops. That's why I was my whole point was that Rodgers played a near perfect game.
Yeah.
Without those drops, he's putting up potentially a perfect pass rating in this game. And Mike McCarthy had complete faith in him that, hey, I'm giving you full access to the castle, full keys.
Yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful moment. I remember too, after the Super Bowl, I went to Peoria to watch it with my dad and at this bar with some of his friends, and how awestruck I was after the game, and maybe a few tears shed. That I'll never forget. And then walking back into high school, I took my two computer speakers, ones with the cords on them. They're from Windows 95, and it still had a plug-in where I plugged it into my iPod at the time and played "We Are the Champions" by Queen, heading into high school with the two computer speakers hoisted above me. I'll never forget that. I wasn't carried off because I'm heading into the high school with full of Bears fans. There's maybe one or two Packer fans, but that was one of those, hey, if we're going to call our shot 4 times, then I'm going to show a little bit of confidence. When we always liked, as Packer fans, we're pretty darn humble for what we've accomplished. We kind of let the play do its talking, but that was one of those moments I'm like, hey, let's live in it and be as pumped up as we possibly can.
I won quite a bit of money from that run because there's just a lot of Bears fans, especially for that NFC Championship game where I was betting people in high school about who's going to win, and then bet a couple of like Portillo lunches with like the staff and stuff like that too. So I ended up doing pretty well on that run in terms of monetary and food compensation.
Dave's a senior, paying off his first car, his car loan, whatever you were driving with the
Pontiac Bonneville.
Yeah, Pontiac Bonneville. He's paying the rest of the $3,000 off of it with his winnings from foolish Bear fans who think we don't stand a chance, and they're letting their feelings get into it. Anything else from this glorious 2010 season? And then, for what's to come, we have a bit of a drought coming up.
I wish I could feel that feeling again sometime soon. But after this run, it's just going to be like sorrow after sorrow, like the same movie being played over and over again with But so the 2010 playoff run with Rodgers, then all of a sudden translates into the 2011 probably most historic Rodgers season there is. I mean, the man was on a mission. You go 15-1, you're just absolutely grooving. The games that I have listed for kind of really stand out: Denver game, 4 touchdown passes, 2 rushing touchdowns.
I was at that one.
Oh, that's a good game to go to. Nice.
Put up 6 TDs that day, two rushing.
Yeah, that was and one of them got reviewed. It was Rodgers kind of stretching
for like 15 minutes. I remember sitting there and I'm like, what are they looking at here? I'm like, I see it up on the jumbotron. He clearly extends the ball over and he's getting it over, breaking the plane.
But not to get too far. So they bring in Randall Cobb that year. Randall Cobb's first touch as a Packer goes 108 to the house on a kick return. And
after the lockout too. You remember this is the lockout? They didn't play any preseason. The Rodgers post-game interview, and he's like, "Yeah, shows how much we missed those preseason games."
Oh yeah. That was the year that they go on SI magazine, and it's just the whole wide receiving crew with J. Mike there and Rodgers there. They're the cover of Sports Illustrated there. I thought they were actually going to go 16-0. That Chiefs game that they lost surprised me.
They were off that whole entire game. There was like a late kick. Jermichael caught an amazing ball that he turned like 2 different ways and finally had it come over his shoulder to haul it in. Yeah, 15-1. Dave, I put Aaron Rodgers' performance. I remember seeing so many stats throughout that year that he didn't have a game that he was less than like 115 in passer rating the whole entire time. I think that Chiefs game is one of the seldom ones that he dips below that 115 mark. We averaged 35 points a game on offense, and we had to outscore people. So to get this stat, we finished number 32 in pass defense, bottom of the league, last in pass defense, but we finished number 1 in interceptions. You talk about a bend, don't break. I know that's such an overused word, and an opportunistic defense. We're giving up all these yards because it's a second quarter and teams are like, we have to abandon the run game. we got to somehow keep up with this firepower and Aaron Rodgers and all these weapons he has. We're not going to hand the ball off once. And that's probably a reason we gave up so many yards. But look at how many players that had interceptions and like 5+ or 4+ that year. It was nuts.
I think 11 was the start of Rodgers becoming overly obsessed with his stats. Where, he wants to hold, that's when he started trending up to being like holding the record for best passer rating of all time. His interceptions were way down. That's kind of the start of when he would go, anywhere between 35 and 45 touchdowns a year with under 5 interceptions. And that's when he became like, you can't knock him for 11, but it definitely changed the way he thinks, in my opinion. Of like once that season got done with, he was like, okay, like I'm gonna do mitigated risks. I'm not gonna put the ball in as tight of coverage because I don't want that interception. And that kind of became the trend of later in the year. It would hurt us because he would do 16 games in the regular season of I'm going to be cautious with the ball, I'm going to be calculated, you know. And then when we needed to have it in the postseason, he wouldn't pull the trigger on some throws because that's just the way his brain was wired.
And then in playoff defense, they're dissecting you and they're gonna take away your strength as much as possible. Rodgers was sacked quite a bit. I mean, not to jump ahead of that playoff game, he had Marshall.
He got sacked like 50 times or something like that.
Yeah, he had Marshall Newhouse as his tackle for a big majority of the year. That thank God for his legs to be able to get out of it. And you can't forget, this is the start of the relationship of him and Jordy Nelson.
Yeah.
I think Jordy had 1,500 yards that season in that deep post route, that double post that you can see
corner
highlights.
Post.
Corner post, like 8 highlights of Jordy Nelson having 50-yard tutties, and then the back shoulder developing too.
11 was the why does it stick out? I think it was 11. Did they play the Eagles in 11 where Jordy runs like a hitch and go, and Rodgers hits him between the corner and the safety slips, and like Jordy takes it like 90 yards and like throws the ball like over his like shoulder and jumps in the stands. I think no, it might have been Detroit, but I remember that was the start of like you said, Rodgers to Jordy for 80-yard bombs, like all day.
At least once a game, they're gonna get one that's gonna go the distance. Yeah, and he finds that shot play. There's one against the Rams that Al Harris for the Rams and the safety collide, and then Jordy could have backpedaled to the end zone. And this is also that final game of the year. Unless Dave, is there any other games that stick out to you when we're lighting up the scoreboard and our defense is just trying to hold on? That even though we're putting up 35, these are still kind of like one-score games that we're getting to 15-1. But like the one thing I think is important to know, and then you hear about this talked about for all those playoff years that we have and what lies ahead, is we decided to rest our starters, or a few of them, in that finale against the Lions. Matt Flynn comes in, has a record game of most amount of passing yards, and had 6 touchdowns and quite a few plays to Jordy Nelson, and that got him that contract from Seattle for like $40 million.
Yeah.
But we rested starters that week, and you hear about the media asking Rodgers later on if we're going to continue to do that and why we maybe came out flat against the Giants. Do you think that played a part? And when you go back and watch the highlights of this Giants games, and there's fumbles, there are interceptions, we're not in rhythm throughout the game. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it could go both ways. I think that Giants team gets looking back, they're a lot better than we gave them credit for. Like, when the game was over, it's like, how can you lose that? But their front 7 was just monstrous. And that's I think, what recent history has shown the Packers. If you have a good front 4, the Packers can't stick with you. Because if you have a good front 4 and you can drop 7 in coverage, it makes it really, really hard for our offense to do anything. Now, granted, they had the Hail Mary and they had some just wacky stuff that went on that doesn't usually happen in a football game. But, I mean, that's like 49ers, Bucks, Giants. If you have a good front 4 that could get home, You play too high. You hear about it in so many press conferences Aaron Rodgers had. Yeah, they're playing us too high. Didn't leave us a lot of things open down the field. Because Rodgers refuses to take like a 5-yard slant or like, here, let's hit the running back 2 yards in front of me and have him pick up the easy yardage. He's always looking for that 15-yard in or that, play down the sideline, and then you're just patting the ball and you have like just a big guy right in your face then. Yeah, I mean, how could you not when you're conditioned and you're having Jordy catch so many of them, Greg, and then Devontae?
it's up for debate, Dave, that the Giants in 2011, not only from a defensive, front, their front seven or front eight, how well they are, but it's up for debate how who's better at wide receiver, who has a deeper wide receiver room. The Giants had Hakeem Nicks. They also had Victor Cruz.
Plaxico Burress.
Plaxico Burress in 07. 11, I don't think he was on.
Oh, my sorry. I was thinking 07. My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but in 2011, you could put their wide receiver room right up against ours. We maybe edge them because we have J. Mike and Randall Cobb, but we didn't have enough players in the secondary to be able to keep up with the horses that they have at the wide receiver position. And this is when John Kuhn starts to become the folklore with all of his touchdowns that he had, which is one of the few bright spots in this game. But there's drop passes, there's fumbles, there's other type of things. And then when we were, I think, down 14-10, and they catch that 21-10, complete turning of the tide. And that brings us to 2012.
Nice. 2012.
Other thing I have to at least mention, because this is a name drop. One last thing about 2011 is, you remember Brad Jones? He was an inside linebacker, switched to outside linebacker.
I remember Brad Jones.
Yeah, you remember the highlights from the divisional round? He had a blocked field goal and a sack in this game that were like two huge, like, hey, we need to get the defense off the field, or there's something to give our offense a bit of a jolt or a bit of a spark. And Brad Jones played pretty well. So I have to give a little bit of a plug to a player that a lot of Packer fans probably haven't heard in quite some time.
There you go. 2012, we were talking about this leading into our development of this specific run of the segment. Still, one of the most forgettable seasons in our 20-year span that we're doing, because it falls between 2010, 2011, where it's like, okay, you win the Super Bowl, we go 15-1, and then the year after 2012, 2013, Rodgers breaks his collarbone. So 2012 is just kind of one of those lost years where we're kind of having to kind of scratch and crawl for what exactly happened in 2012. To be honest with you, I have the Houston game comes to mind, if you remember the Houston game.
Outside the sky is falling, but inside we're doing all right. I tried finding that clip on YouTube to see exactly what his words were, and I Googled it. I couldn't find it, but that was one of those classic Rodgers phrase that we're 3-4 at the time. People were like, all right, it's time to write off. Their Super Bowl run has come to an end, and maybe this is a bit of a step back for this team that has so much talent on it.
It was, and then like I said, the regular season is kind of lost on me. I remember there was it was the Joe Webb playoff game.
Yeah. Charles Woodson was out for the year with an injury. So was Greg. Ironically, this is their last seasons in Green Bay. And this is also a bit of the start of when Rodgers starts to hold some resentment towards the front office and how we're letting these Packer players leave. Yeah. I mean, I know Greg, there's a story that Greg tells that he knew he was getting let go that season, that Rodgers made a joke to a 49ers player in the beginning of the year. Yeah, you want him. Charles Woodson, the way they let him walk out the door, him and Greg are coming back after missing quite a few games. There's other players that were out, like Ryan Grant with injury. He came back in week 14. Dwan Harris was our running back in the playoffs.
Dwan Harris.
Yeah, lead back that year. So yeah, there's injuries. There's probably some holes on defense that we couldn't quite account for. And yeah, Joe Webb was the last second starting quarterback for the Vikings. What was it? Bridgewater got hurt.
It wasn't Bridgewater. It was. Was it? I don't think Bridgewater wouldn't be that early. Was it Sam Bradford?
Yeah, it's either Sam Bradford or I'm trying to think number 7. Either way, Joe Webb starting quarterback. He's a wide receiver, and in 2012, AP came off that ACL tear. He broke or he went off for 2,000 yards that season. He erupted on us both times. I remember playing in Minnesota that season. He went off for 200. There's nothing we could do to stop him. He's breaking 8 tackles on his way to the end zone.
We talk about windows, right? So I would think you could classify this part of the years that we're doing it as the window was probably 09 to 11. Like you got 1 in 10. 12, it's pretty clear there's a little bit of change. Like I said, there's injuries that pop up. You kind of get past Joe Webb. If they have a quarterback, I don't even know if we get out of the wild card. And then you have Kaepernick just running all over us.
We had a great start to that game too. Sam Shields pick 6, another touchdown to start us off. But boy, we could not contain what Preston Smith says is trying to catch a chicken out in an open field without a fence.
It was weird, but that game was like looking at what a high school football team would run. Okay, we got an athletic quarterback, and you knew what was coming, and it was like 40-yard scampers every friggin' time. It was ridiculous. He was running wild. That was frustrating.
And they said that was a reason that they drafted Dante Jones in the first round out of UCLA, is that we need to get better on the defensive front, have someone set the edge much better and try to contain the quarterback. Whether that worked in our favor as much as possible. But boy, yeah, Kaepernick looked like a high school quarterback. Hey, I'm just gonna, run to this end, and then I have enough speed to be able to get around the corner, and then it's off to pay dirt after that. I will say though, shout out to Charles Woodson and how he played in that wild card game. His shoulder injury, and I have a poster on my wall that I think is from that game. He's wearing a sick face mask, and there were so many plays that he's like sacrificing his body, stopping Adrian Peterson, stacking him at the line of scrimmage. So just the warrior that Charles Woodson was in all those years, that you see a lot of people make business decisions at the cornerback position and not put their body on the line. Charles Woodson is a rare breed that I think is you won't see again for many of moons. And that's 2012.
That was a quick wrap up on 2012, but there wasn't much there.
I don't think a lot of Packer fans are going to rebuke the 2012 season.
Or really, 2013 is only memorable because of the collarbone. They get off to a decent start, and then, or not even. It was so. But like, I vividly remember I was in Buffalo Wild Wings with Karen, where we decided to go out for the game because. I think there's a conflict with like the Bears playing at the same time as the Packers, so they blacked out the Packer game, so we had to go out to watch it. So we went out, and the game was going well, and then all of a sudden Rodgers is on a golf cart, shoulder hanging all over the place. And that's when the hatred for the Vikings in me really started, because you have people just cheering their asses off. You have Barr just doing some crazy ass dance in the background while Rodgers is on the ground writhing in pain. We ended up winning that game.
This is the Shea McClellan collarbone break against the Bears. I think you may be thinking of the second one in 17.
Am I?
Potentially, yes.
I could have sworn the collarbone happened in 13. The Vikings collarbone in 13. We'll fact check. You talk, I'll fact check.
Okay. You bring up Rodgers' injury. The other one I have to call out, because I think this changes the dynamic of our offense and how much Rodgers loved throwing to him. And Rodgers didn't force the ball a ton. You brought up 2011 is the start of that. He cares about his stats so much. There's one player that he would force the ball to.
I was wrong. You're right.
All good. The player that he forced the ball to in the middle of the field that he got away from after he left is Jermichael Finley. Had that career-ending injury against the Browns. In a game that he was breaking tackles left and right. They didn't have an answer for Jermichael Finley that game. And then he has that crazy hit. And I remember they stopped the game for like 20 minutes, and Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers and all those players are standing around him. And you even hear the post-game interviews that they're like rethinking playing football because they have their brother that's lying on the field and they don't even know if he's going to get up.
I think that really fucked up Rodgers when it came to throwing into the middle of the field.
After J. Mike left,
Yeah,
that he's a bit hesitant to because he doesn't have a 6'5" wide receiver and a tight end's body.
well, I also think he just thought that he killed someone when he made that throw, and J. Mike did that. So like there is that too.
How about that Week 15 Cowboys game? Lambeau South, we're down 26-3 with Matt Flynn. And at the game, it's one of like his first starts. We brought him back to come play for us because Seneca Wallace and Scott Tolzien couldn't cut it.
Yeah.
There was injuries to them. I remember that Scott Tolzien scramble where he does the spin move and then dives into the end zone. One of the iconic plays for the Packers throughout the past couple of decades. But yeah, Matt Flynn comes back, doesn't miss a beat, and still knows the offense. And we're down a ridiculous amount, and then here he is carrying us back in the game, and Jordy Nelson is mossing Orlando Scandrick for a touchdown. This is a year that Eddie Lacy in his rookie season is Offensive Player of the Year, and he is just a battering ram that nobody wants to tackle.
That was fun with Lacy having we've very rarely had a power back, and so it's fun just being like, oh, he's just bouncing off people. That was fun to watch. And then I classify it as, I have in my note, it's just like a wasted year. It's just one of those years where you lose a star player like Rodgers, you know you're not going to really get anything out of it. You lose Jay. There's just a lot of bad juju going on with this team that year. It was just didn't feel right.
Randall Cobb's out too. After a year, not to talk about 2012, but one of the things to mention is that Randall led our whole entire team in receiving, and he was a true number one. He was like a Percy Harvin. They're lining him up in the backfield. They're putting him all over the offense.
Didn't he break his leg against the Bengals that year or something? Was it he broke his leg or
in 2013? Yeah, he did break his leg. I don't know who it happened to, but in that season finale when him and Rodgers come back. But that's just another injury to think of. And sorry, I have to call off this one game because it's
– you're fine.
You brought it up in 2007. I haven't really thought about football quite like this, but an aesthetically pleasing game to watch with snow and the colors of the teams. Week 16, the Steelers at home. You have yellow and white and green. It looks easy on the ice. Lambeau Field's beat up at this time of the year. I don't know what they were doing to the grass, but that 2013 season, you watch the field and you're like, it looks like they're playing out on a mud pit.
Yeah.
It was a really aesthetically pleasing game to watch. This is like who drafted the better player? The Steelers took Le'Veon Bell a couple slots ahead of Eddie Lacy in like the 42 pick. A couple spots later, we took Lacy, and both of these two it's score for score. Le'Veon Bell gets his. Eddie Lacy is going off for another run. He's got an ankle injury, and this is one of my all-time favorite Packers. Micah Hyde has one of the games of ages where they talk about he's a 4-down player. He's taking kickoff returns almost for a touchdown in the game. He's making tackles all over the field. Snow's coming down. Just a really pleasing one to watch that we came out on the wrong side of it, but just an old school brawl type game, and one that definitely stands out in this sort of reset of a year in 2013.
Man, there was a tie that year, and I knew that football can end in a tie, but apparently some of the players didn't know a game can end in a tie. Like the game wrapped up, they're like, oh, I thought we were just going to keep playing. Like it was just one of those like fluky, from a record wise to how the team played to how injuries stacked up. It's kind of like an anomaly. It was just like one of those weird years that. There's only probably 2 or 3 years that we've had like this in 30 years.
That's most franchises, though.
Yeah, I know. We're not most franchises.
I know. That's got to be one of those moments that you're pretty darn thankful and grateful that we're having these fluke years that happen like once a decade.
I mean, the Lions until recently would take 8-7-1 every year.
Oh yeah, I would say their fans would be rejoicing if they had an 8-7-1 8-7-1 finish. Jarrett Boykins was our third wide receiver that year.
Yeah.
Boykins had a pretty awesome campaign. Another one is like Sean Richardson was a safety that had a couple of
You're pulling out some great names here.
Late season. It's from that Steelers game. Sean Richardson had like 12 tackles or something like that in it. And yeah, you have sort of these fill-in players that you don't hear about. And then we have that one of the best Rodgers games in his career. I mean, I wouldn't say statistically it's one of his best, but everybody remembers. And he's got Cobb wide open on 4th and 6.
Yeah.
NFC title game on the line.
That game, that Larvey call was awesome. And then also just Kuhn stepping up into the hole, and because it was Peppers that he stuffed, right, Kuhn?
Yeah.
And Rodgers rolls, and you have what was it? I knew the Bears cornerback. What was it?
Chris Conte, their safety.
Yeah, and he bit up on it. And I remember Bears fans for a long time always kind of complaining that Conte would get lost, and he got lost at the perfect moment.
He stuck around that team for a few more years after that. You're scratching your head, but we also had MD Jennings at safety starting in 2011 or 2012 in the Phil Mary year. And Dave, I actually have this in my notes too. Wonky play. So there's a play in this game that Julius Peppers appears to like bat the ball out of Rodgers' hand. His hand's coming forward. It's a tuck rule. And all the players stop. And they're like, all right, yeah, we think we heard the whistle or the play's dead. And then the ball is just kind of, putting around on the ground. And Aaron Rodgers comes up to Jarrett Boykins. He's like, grab it. Jarrett Boykins picks the ball up, runs into the end zone for a touchdown. They're at like the 10 or 15 at this point. And that was a score in that, a critical score.
Yeah.
And everybody else thinks that the play's dead. And we were able to get 6 on it because of it. And in that series too, this is like one of those iconic John Elway 2-minute drill offense. Before he hit Cobb on that 4th and 6 to win it, to walk off. Yeah, he hits Jordy Nelson on a 4th down to pick up the sticks. That was crucial. It was like a 4th and 2, and he barely gets it to him. Jordy Nelson's like falling down at the same time. And then there's another, I want to say it's a handoff to John Kuhn on 4th and short, where if they stop any of these up until that Cobb touchdown, the game's over. What else do we have for this 2013 season? Anything that we have to end on a high note? So our glass is half full here at Packers on the Rocks.
Oh man,
we may have to reach.
I don't know. There's not. I mean, going into this stretch now, this is gonna be the torture stretch. I mean,
the worst is yet to come. The worst starts off for our part 3.
I know. This is gonna be. I guess the high note is we're going to be starting the health segment in the next segment that we do. When we go, 14 to 18, it's just going to be torture after torture.
We got to reach deep in our bag to find
silver lining.
Yeah, find silver lining with this 2013 campaign. Rodgers returning after how many weeks with a collarbone injury that you don't quite think it's possible. And, I don't want to even talk about Kaepernick 2.0 and them beating us at Lambeau and the wild card. Maybe we just look forward to 2014 and how this is one of our most talented rosters. It should have been a Super Bowl year, but it was a really fun year to watch, and how we're blowing out teams and our defense comes together mid-season.
It was the start of 13, we got a run game with Eddie Lacy. 14, that carries over, and you can marry the run game with the pass game finally. You haven't seen that in a long time in Green Bay, of those two actually coming together. So that's kind of your bow on top. We got
there's a good teaser. All right, that makes me feel good. Otherwise, we're gonna hop off of this. I'm gonna be thinking about the 2011 Giants playoff loss, the back-to-back 49ers playoff losses.
There's going to be a lot of that to come, man. We're just getting, tip of the iceberg of this is our year to total meltdown.
Super Bowl or bust. Outside of that, I mean, we can put a bow on this thing, land the plane until next week. Any parting words for our Packers on the Rocks fans?
I think we're 5 weeks away from camp and actual activity starting. So we're right around the corner here of actually getting into the current team and position battles and us predicting 53-man rosters and talent evaluation and all that fun stuff. So just hang with us for a little bit longer here in the dead zone, and then it'll be here before you know it. Meantime, kind of just hit the golf links, enjoy your summer, have a ice cold beer on the beach, whatever you guys fancy.
Ditto to that. Well, until next time, Dave, been another fun one reminiscing with you from high school years to the beginning of the friendship at NIU.
Yeah, man, we'll have to do a late night edition where we can actually drink bourbon instead of coffee.
Instead of us recovering somewhat from the night before. Fly on the dry, man. Fly on the dry.
Right. Yeah, there we go. I think we'll end on that note.
Yes. Cheers, Packers on the Rocks.